So we are all getting ready. It's like 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Let's meet our new presenter, Ying Tung from the Normal University in China. And do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but can you try to share the screen straight away? So
Yes, I will.
we
Yes.
are sure that it all works. Excellent.
I'm sharing it now. Okay.
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah. We see. So we now start. But please remember, you have 25 minutes talk, no more, and then 5 minutes for discussion. So after 20 minutes, I will have to interrupt you and remind you that 5 minutes are left, unless you acknowledge it somehow in your own presentation.
Okay, perfect.
Okay?
Thank you.
So the floor is yours.
Okay. So first of all, I'm really sorry that I cannot come to the conference because of the traveling issue, and the time conflict. And actually, I'm going to present a paper that is written by me and Maria Teresa and Zhao Hong. It's about Markov switching DSGE model and to study the issue of energy security and also the optimal subsidy policy. So first of all, the background of our paper is that because of the Russian and Ukraine war, people try to focus the issue that EU are actually having their energy 34% supplied from Russia in 2019 and is heavily is rely on a single country. So they are more focused on the concept of energy resilience and energy security issue. And our paper is actually to use the DSGE model to study this issue. So I will first skip the result, but because I know that it's about the time is about later, so I will skip the result. And so our paper is basically to build a model for analysis. So our model is actually a combination of the three types of literature. First of all, is the DSGE models. Recently, people use DSGE model to study the environmental issue and energy issue, including House, Fisher, Stringborn, and Kunze, and that paper. And we try to merge this DSGE model, adding the regime switching component into it to study the energy security issue. And where the regime switching paper, there's a lot of regime switching paper that using the WISE toolbox to do the DSGE model. But we are the first one to study the energy security issue. And indeed, the energy resilience and energy security is not new in the literature, but most of the existing literature is not doing DSGE model, it's not doing the theoretical work. So basically, we are trying to combine the three types of literature by using a model. So our model is an initial try to study this issue, and it's a very simple one. So let's talk about the main, just a few equation of the model. So basically, it's a real business cycle model without nominal rigidity. Our production function involved, the new thing is that besides capital and labor, we also have energy, ET, in the equation 1. And the energy here can be supplied by either the domestic producer energy, ED, and also the imported energy, EM. And you see that EM is a function of the state variables. So we classify the model into two regimes. One is the normal regime that the energy import is normally imported from Russia or other country. And you have another energy crisis regime that there's a sudden decrease in the energy import. So basically, the equation 3 is the new, only our new model is only new in equation 3, and also with energy in the production function. But basically, the other stuff are the same as the textbook model. So here we plot very simple demand and supply curve to illustrate what's going on in our model. So we classify the model into two regimes. One regime is normal regime that the energy supply EM is large. So you have a large EM, and the rest of your energy demand is supplied by UED1. So with a large energy import, so your energy price is low. And then in the crisis regime, then there's a sudden decrease in the energy import. So it's not a shock, but regime switching process that the energy suddenly fall to a very small amount, and the rest of the demand have to be produced domestically, and that's why it will drive up the price from P1 to P2. So basically, it's a dynamic model, but for a simple illustration, this is explained by this demand and supply curve. So the energy, so we have two states, E1 and E2, where E1 is normal regime and E2 is the crisis regime. And it follows the discrete first of the Markov switching process, right, with the probabilities described by this matrix. And we also have the production function for the, as if you have to produce the energy domestically, then you have to produce energy according to this function, where phi2 is greater than 1, so the cost function is actually convex, so that the marginal production is increasing when you produce more energy. Okay, so the rest of the model is basically the same as this textbook model, and we specify only two types of shock. First of all is the TFP shock, equation 2, and also we specify the preference shock, which appear in the utility function, to characterize the demand shock, the shock from the demand sides of the household, and also the TFP shock characterize the supply side shock from the firms. Okay, the other stuff are actually the same. Okay, so we try to keep the model simple. We do not add other financial friction, nominal rigidity, other advanced component into our model. Okay. So we calibrate our parameter. We basically most of them follow the literature, and we for P1 and P2 we use the Europe data, the share of import data, to calibrate the parameter of the cost function of the energy production, which is new in our model. So we do not. I'm not talking about this in detail. So I will then focus on our numerical result and what our main finding is. So we have quite a lot of figure. So first of all, we do not consider the regime switching first, and we do the steady state analysis. So we plot the steady state of the variable against the TFP levels. And we found that it's clear that if you the economy with higher TFP and you have higher output and you have higher energy consumption, and if you are changing from regime 1, the blue light, to regime 2, the purple light, and you will see that the domestic, because of there's a sudden decrease, the decrease in the energy import, so that you get a more domestic energy production, and because the energy price increase, so the total energy consumption decrease, and it will affect your output and affect your welfare. So this is a long-run effect. We do not consider the changing from one regime to another regime. We will just want to compare the difference in the variable in the steady state of the two regimes. Okay, so this short one. And we also do the impulse response function. We try to consider, first of all, the positive TFP shock, and try to, so these 5 are the impulse response function. So of course, it's clear that if you have positive TFP shock, you have high output and welfare, and because households get more income, so they have more consumption, and the firms to demand more energy. So that's why you see the positive response to energy consumption and domestic energy production. But when you switch from regime 1 to regime 2, you will see that actually the output would increase less, which is clear because the economy will decrease to a smaller scale, because now the energy has become more expensive. So you have to produce more energy. So in the second diagram, you will see that because largest share of energy is produced domestically, so that's why you see the energy would be more sensitive. The domestic energy will be more sensitive to the shock, because if you import more energy from the foreign countries, then the supply is actually constant. So the energy consumption would not that depends on the shock. But if you produce the energy yourself, then the firm's decision will respond to the shock, and that's why you will see a more volatile, more responsive energy to the TFP shock. So this is the supply side shock. And we also consider the preference shock. that if we find that if first of all, if the household have a positive face a positive preference shock, they will consider the benefit in the more recent future more. So they will care only today, but they will not care about tomorrow. And then you will see that the consumption will increase, and because it's just like a decrease in their discount factor. So they have more consumption, they do not care about the future, and they are not willing to supply their labor. So that's why you will also see a decrease in output. And because of the sunken of the economy, so you will see that the amount of energy would also decrease. Okay, but interestingly, when you compare the responding of two regimes, you will see that energy actually respond more. Okay, in preference regime and also in the TFP shock. So energy becomes more responsive to both demand and supply side shock. Why? Because the in the regime two, in the crisis regime, you actually have a larger share of energy produced domestically. So that's why you have the energy is actually more volatile because the firms will respond to the shock. So that's why no matter which shock you have, the energy will be more responsive. So you imagine the extreme case that all the energy are imported. The country do not produce energy themselves. So you will see that if you are a small country, then you will see that the energy, the import response of energy will be zero. We will not responsive to the shock. So that's why if more energy you produce, the more response to either kind of the shock you have. So this is the result. So we do not consider the regime switching yet. And then now this is the regime switching that we consider. So here there's a parameter P12 to capture the probability, the transition probability from normal regime to the crisis regime. So in this diagram, we want to study what happened if the economy would find themselves have a higher probability to enter the crisis regime. So we do not we do not assume the crisis to happen. We just assume that if the economy know that there's a high probability to enter the crisis regime, then how will that affect the response? So the first thing we find is that consumption will actually respond less. Okay, so this bar chart is actually the cumulative response. So we stimulate the impulse response, and then we add up all the response from 1 to infinity, and then we see how the change with P12, and we find that if you have high P12, the high probability to enter crisis region, consumption will respond less to the TFP shock. Okay, from the fifth diagram, from the left rightmost diagram. So why this is the case? Because households will have precautionary saving. So even if the crisis does not happen, because they know that there's a high probability to become poor, so they will save more for precautionary motive. So that's why you see the consumption decrease will not increase that much as otherwise with the case that P12 is low. So that's why with lower increase in consumption, lower demand, so that's why consumption also increase less, as well as the increase in total energy consumption and also domestic energy. So you will see that all decrease. But welfare actually become more responsive than that because households save more. So in the long term, actually households are more benefit. Households are more benefit. They have more higher consumption in the future because of the precautionary saving now, and then from future they have more consumption. So that's why you will see a more responsive of welfare. So on the other hand, we also consider the positive second shock, and because also of the precautionary motive purpose, you will see that the response of consumption is also lower even in the preference shock. So that's why the pattern of output, domestic energy, and total energy consumption follows with no responsiveness, and also the welfare would decrease more because the households with the preference shock, they will supply less labor. They do not want to work that much because of the high preference shock. They care about their labor utility, so that's why the welfare decreased. So in summary, we found that a higher probability of transition will make the consumption, output, and energy, all these variables less responsive and with more responsive welfare. So the welfare will be sensitive to to the shock if your economy has a higher probabilities to transit to the crisis regime. Okay. So this is preliminary result. We also do some robustness check, but I didn't show it here. But our model is so simple that we maybe the result will be different if we add the nominal rigidity or other more advanced setting in our model. So now, this diagram is that we try to allow both TFP shock and preference shock to happen, and we assume the crisis the regime switch in period 100. So there's a certain decrease in energy import in period 100. We will find that the output would decrease, and also the energy consumption would decrease dramatically because you get less energy import. And also, this is clear, so the welfare would also decrease. And if you read the diagram carefully, so the shake area is the 95% confidence interval. So we stimulate, basically use the model to stimulate 1,000 times, and we try to compute the confidence interval in each period. So then we see that the confidence interval actually increase in the crisis regime, meaning that you see the shade area, the purple shade area is actually larger than the blue shaded area. So we see that in the crisis regime, the standard the wallet actually the energy consumption become more volatile. We are not uncertain about the path of the total energy consumption and domestic consumption. And you can also see that the output would be constantly lower, the purple line and than the blue line after the regime. So it take a long term, if 100 period, it does not recover to the normal levels. So the effect is long lasting. Okay, so this is the simulation and simulation path of our model. And then, so this is a main result that, no, this is not the main result of our model paper. The main part is that we try to consider the Ramsey problem. We compute the second best policy. That is, we use the first order condition as the constraint, and we try to assume the social planner to maximize the utility and subject to the first order condition of the economy. And so the optimal subsidy is, this is the subsidy for subsidizing the production of domestic energy. So when we see that, okay, so there's a bad effect on the crisis, and when the crisis happens, so how should the government respond? How much should the government subsidize the domestic production? So we try to compute this second best policy using the Ramsey social planning problem. And so again, we found that number one, so the optimal subsidy, you should subsidy more when you have higher TFP level, which is trivial because if you get a larger economy, when A increase in the long term, and you get more tax for the subsidy. So that's why when the economy is large, driven by a higher A, you get a higher optimal subsidy. And on the other hand, we've also found that keeping other thing constant, if you import more energy, you have a larger EN on the second diagram, that you should also have more subsidy to the domestic energy production because you rely more on the foreign energy supply, so it's better for you to subsidize more for the domestic energy production. It's basically also because of the production cost of the domestic energy production is convex. So that's why if you have high EM, that means your domestic energy is low. So if your initial domestic energy production is low, so then the marginal production cost is low. So it's better for you to subsidize it. So that's why we have these two results. And this is a long-term result. This is a steady state analysis. And we also do the impulse response function, find out how does the optimal subsidy respond to the shock. We found that, okay, if you have TFT shock, you should increase your subsidy, while you have the preference shock, you should decrease your subsidy. Okay, so it's actually also because of it's about the size of the economy. So if you have higher TFT shock, your economy is larger, and then you should subsidy more because you collect more tax from the household. Compared to regime two, regime one, regime two is lower response. This is a little bit counterintuitive. It means that if in a crisis regime with the same shock, the optimal subsidy actually respond less in percentage. Okay, this is a little bit surprising. This is also because of the scale effect, that because the economy is actually smaller, okay, with higher energy import in the crisis regime, so the subsidy amount is lower. And for this the diagram on the right-hand side, we found that because the government expenditure and the taxation is carved out by consumption, with weapons of household care much about their consumption, so that's why they pay less tax, they save less, so the economy is smaller, so the optimal subsidy is lower to the preference shock. So this is what we found. So in summary, the main message is that we found that the optimal subsidy in the short run should depend on different side of shock of the economy. So the
you
final
have 5
result.
minutes. Just you have
Okay,
5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, just I will wrap up just 2 slides more. So the last result we have is we find out how does the subsidy depends on the probability of the crisis happen P12. So we found that from the 2 diagrams, the left-hand side is the one with TFP shock, and the right-hand side is the one with the preference shock. So we found that interesting, if you have the economy is more likely to enter the crisis regime, the subsidy should be less responsive to the shock. So governments have to be consistent on the subsidy. So its decision should not depend much on the shock you have. So we found that the P12 increase shock are less responsive to economic shock. So a lot of diagrams. So let me summarize. So our model is very simple one, and we will have a lot of work we have to do for expansion. So the main result is that, first of all, we found that the sudden decrease in the interval of the energy supply has a large economic effect. It will reduce output, energy consumption, and also social welfare. And the second thing is that not only when the crisis happen, it would affect the economy, but households expect the crisis happen, households believe would also affect the impulse response function. If they believe the shock happened, if they believe the crisis happen more likely, and then the impulse response will be very different from the counterfactual cases. Okay, and then we also studied the subsidy policy. We found that number one, the subsidy policy depends on the economic situation, such as the productivity level and the preference of the household. And we found that the optimal policy will be less responsive to the shock if the probabilities of a transition is high. So this is our main message, and it's all of my presentation. So the model is very simple. So the comment, we are still working on it, and your comment will be welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. You actually kind of 2 minutes earlier than required. Okay. So any questions from the floor? No? Any online questions? Yes, we have online question.
Hello, thank you. So we have one question online. He asks, why do you suggest that total factor production growth is 0 at steady state? It may heavily influence the results. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your question. So because actually you can assume positive growth, because in the DSGE model, you need to assume the steady state to be constant. So that's another thing to modify the model, that you can assume there's positive growth, and you use this simple technique as in the growth literature, that you translate the model into the one that without growth. And then that's why you can do the perturbation around the steady state. Yeah, this is the computational issue. But you are correct that it's better for us to consider the economy with economic growth and see how does the growth rate affect our result. Yeah. So thank you for your suggestion. So yeah, because so we didn't consider that in this stage because of the computational issue that in the business cycle we normally do not assume the growth any growth rate for the variable, but we can do it for by transition. I mean for transforming the variable in the variable that without growth. So we can first consider the model with growth rate and then we can transform it into the model without growth. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your answer. Is there any further question? Then thank you very much for your presentation, and we go to the next one.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, 2 minutes. As you can breathe for 2 minutes and concentrate.